All right, welcome to the AdaptX podcast, where we have discussions with individuals who are building accessible businesses or products, advocating for inclusion, or excelling in adaptive sports. Our intention is never to speak on behalf of those with disabilities, but rather to amplify their ideas and voice and learn strategies to scale our impact and help other businesses become more inclusive. We know that inclusion can't be achieved only by businesses that were dedicated to support individuals with disabilities, but has to be a community effort to prioritize accessibility. Today, we are joined by two members of the team at Roll Mobility, a mobile app that strives to be the Yelp of accessibility. I'll turn it over to the team now to introduce themselves.
I'm Rachel with Roll Mobility. I do communications and social content for our team and newsletters. And
We're a small team, so we all do everything, unfortunately and fortunately. So that's that's how
That's
it
a
works.
that, that's an essential part of businesses being able to wear many hats. So
Absolutely. And I'm Joe Foster. About 3 years ago, we had come up with an idea for the app um, over some napkin math, and now we're here, officially launched in February of 2023.
yeah, that basically segues into my first question, which was going to be like, can you kind of take me from concept to creation? What sparked the idea, and why did you determine that it would be an app versus a mobile platform versus a web-based platform? So, if you kind of want to take me back 3 years and how it all started, that'd be great.
It was a cold, dark day. No. I have been lucky enough to have been volunteering with the U.S. Paralympic Association and the BOEC out of Breckenridge, and they run a program every year called the Hartford Invitational, and it's called Ski Spectacular. So we've probably got a few people that have been to Ski Spectacular or are aware of it. And we finished a day on the slopes and we wanted to take a group of athletes out to dinner. And so we started calling restaurants and saying, can we have three people in wheelchairs in your establishment? Do you have tables for us? Is there a ramp to get in? And all three restaurants said, "Yeah, of course we're accessible." And I can already see you nodding that you know where this is going, and this is the reaction that we see over and over again. So we get to the restaurant that we've chosen specifically because it's got an elevator to get down to the bathroom in case anybody needs to use the bathroom. And there's two steps to get inside, and there is no ramp. And because we're with a group of athletes who are very comfortable in their bodies and very comfortable with themselves, we make it work. We get downstairs and we've got to move four tables out to the sides to accommodate wheelchairs. And then we've got somebody that needs to use the bathroom and they go to the elevator. And the elevator is from 1960 something, and it's too small to facilitate a wheelchair. And we were sitting at the table and we just asked them, this never happens in a big city, right? This never happens to you in your hometown. This never happens to you anywhere. And they all said, no. Anytime I go anywhere new, it's a phone call and maybe a drive by my significant other or by an able-bodied friend. And the information just isn't there. You're asking people who don't understand your mobility issue for information, and specific nuanced information about a location. So I came back down into Denver and started talking to a friend who was doing software development and design, Shane Blanford, and we set up some napkin math. And then our first step was actually sending out emails and doing our first step was sending out emails and gathering groups of people and asking them what they would like and if this was even something that they thought was pertinent. And it was a very eye-opening experience because they almost to a person said yes, or I've been thinking about how to do this for 4 years. So that was the impetus and the kind of genesis of how things started. We created a version that Shane doesn't like how I say it, but I say it looks like your friend's cousin's brother built it in his basement. It was clunky, and half of the time you could sign in, and half of the time you couldn't sign in. But we started putting that into people's hands and having them use it, and we learned a whole lot that first 6 months about what people wanted to see, what we could ask, what we couldn't ask. And that really led towards a complete rebuild of the app from the ground up, and towards the launch in February.
Yeah, that's kind of lean startup principles. You start with like a minimal viable product and you get feedback, see what works, see what people want, and then you iterate on the process as opposed to investing an egregious amount of money up front and making sure that it's actually solving a problem that people want. So getting feedback from the stakeholders beforehand, but then also starting with something kind of a small tech stack and then building onto it as it becomes more viable. But was the app development process multiple years? Obviously, it took a few years to get to where it is now, or kind of at what point did you think like, okay, now is the time to launch? Did you feel like you had to hit a certain number of reviews?
No, to be honest, we actually held it way too close to the vest for a really long time. Um, One of the issues that we have with presenting it to people is we know how many people in the space have been burned so many times with, oh, we have this great new thing for you, and then you get it and it's clunky and you can't use it, or it's really not designed well, and it doesn't work at all, or it just doesn't fit in, and they haven't really listened to what the community has asked them for. And so we held on to it for probably 6 to 8 months longer than we should have, um, because we wanted to present to people that we had heard over and over again, hey, we keep getting stuff that is like this, and it doesn't work, or it's not what we're really looking for. And we did not want to do that to the community. We wanted to come out with something that was pretty polished and ready to go. We did an okay job of that. Of course, you know, when you're using a product every single day, you intuitively know how to go from point A to point B because you're the one that designed point A to point B. And so it has been interesting to see the ways that people break things, and utilize it on their own. But one of our core tenets has always been that we're not here to say to people what they need. Rachel actually has a great point about we're both recovering therapists, and almost all of the therapy language is very ableist and is very much centered around dysfunction. And Rachel, would you say disability?
No, just more like limitation first, right? Versus letting the patient or the disabled population quantify maybe like what is functional to them, which taps into, this hard thing that we're doing is trying to create something for a community that is, even in the world of spinal cord injury, which I have a spinal cord injury, each person's individual presentation is just so unique. We're trying to build this platform that meets the needs of many when people have such unique experiences, and such unique presentations and needs.
Brendan, you see this all the time because you train people that have the exact same diagnosis and they present like completely different.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're referring to is kind of what we distinguish between like a medical model of disability and a social model, whereas like a medical model says you have XYZ wrong with you. It's my role as a professional to get you closer to some baseline, predetermined baseline, versus a social model that says you aren't disabled by a specific impairment, but rather by an environment that isn't catered to the specific needs you have. So it kind of puts the onus on the business, it puts the onus on the environment to be accessible, obviously, to the individual, and not just kind of meet some preconceived idea of how everyone should function in their environments. So that's where I find it interesting to kind of approach this problem as a whole. Since accessibility can be so diverse, it's like, how do you quantify every aspect of accessibility within an environment? So I'd be interested in kind of seeing how you guys are addressing problems, not the word, because that's not really a problem, but how are you addressing like that piece of determining whether a building's accessible or not? Because you're essentially crowdsourcing users' feedback, right?
Absolutely. I think it's a lot of listening on the front end, right? And the willingness to just publicly fail forward. Like Joe mentioned, we've been holding it close, waiting for it to be perfect. But the fact is we just have to put it out there and just be continuously improving our product and continuously taking feedback in from our community.
One of the things we did right at the beginning was we just had it on a star rating system. And we said, rate the accessibility of this location on a 1 to 5 scale. And we learned very quickly people that were allies did not feel comfortable rating it because they didn't feel that they had the expertise to rate it. People that had disabilities, which is a whole nother wormhole, felt that they weren't disabled enough, or they were too disabled, so they'd be cutting people out. And we wound up with a system where no one really felt comfortable just doing a narrative that said, yeah, the front door is accessible, but I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that. I'm going to give it 3 stars. Or we would see people would rate it 5 stars because it only had 2 steps to get from the first level to the second level. And so we very quickly iterated away from that and moved towards a system that asks the question, is there automatic door opener at the front door? Is there large thresholds at the different spots in the building? Are there large, thick throw rugs or different styles of carpeting? Are there mostly bar top, or are there mostly wheelchair height tables? Things like that. And so we really boiled it down to, we took those 50 people that we had asked questions to and presented them a list of, I think it was 25 questions, and we crowdsourced the 10 questions that they really felt were the things that they wanted to know and needed to know. We know that we're not going to be able to offer really, really granular information yet. But knowing a little bit that is coming from one of your peers versus calling a restaurant and asking a hostess who knows nothing about, anything about you is so much more valuable than I think we even have the concept of. One of the stories that was one of the defining moments for the app was we had a gentleman who attended one of our little information sessions where we asked for feedback and just asked people to go through and leave a review and make sure that we had set it up so that it was easy to use and was working well. And he told a story where he had found a gal that he really was interested in, asked her on a date, went to, called the restaurant and really wanted to downplay any of the difficulties of being in a wheelchair. And they showed up at this restaurant that he had called, and the classic thing happened. They did not have an accessible entrance at the front. They had to take him around the back alley, put a ramp at the back alley, and then bring him through the kitchen. And here he is trying to, really present like, hey, look, I can do, this is really not a big deal. Thankfully, it sounds like she laughed it off and they remained friends. But there's little things that would really help. And so we've got the 10 questions and then a space that just says, is this space, what other details about this space do you need to know? And so there is a spot where you can say the accessible entrance is down the back alley, or any other information, or even that, hey, I got there and the owner wouldn't shovel the walk for me, like wouldn't shovel the ramp after it had snowed. We've heard that instance a couple of times.
It's interesting listening to you talk kind of about the process, because it's one of the things, it's one project that we've talked about taking on to a degree, is like identifying what fitness centers around the country are accessible, and almost building out like a database of accessible gyms. So it would be interesting to almost piggyback off of the platform you're already building. Like instead of us going out of our way to reinvent the wheel, we just reach out directly to the gym owners in our network, get them listed on your app. Maybe there can be a different segue when you're navigating it. You can select restaurants versus fitness centers versus something, and it gives you like a push pin map, or you enter your zip code and it shows on kind of a smaller scale map what gyms in your area are accessible. But I was also, as you were talking about people rating things, a thought that came to mind was like, what if you went to a gym like mine and I didn't have an automatic door in front and you rated it a 1? Would you give that feedback to the business owner? Because then what if I go ahead and I install a handicap accessible entrance? Do I then reach out to you and say, hey, can you update my rating? Like, I've changed this.
And so one of the ways that we've tried to get around that is the ratings are cumulative. And so if you have one person that rates it a 1, and then you have 3 people that rate it a 5 because you've updated it, then even you as the owner, without having us reach out to you, can go ahead and go in and answer the questions, and change things, as well as, I hesitate to talk about it because I don't know how far out we are, but we're also incorporating picture and video at this point. And so you can take a picture of the front entrance and say, here it is, we fixed it, and then re-rate it so that people know. We do have, I know we've got several gyms in the Denver area. There's a place called CrossFit Watchtower that's owned by a gentleman who's in a wheelchair, and they're on the app. But yeah, there is the ability to filter with the mapping system that we use. So we would love to put gyms on there, especially if you've already got the location data. It makes it really easy for us to extrapolate that data and just place it on the map. That's one of the things that we're really excited to do with people that already have the data. We've been reaching out to adaptive programs, and placing them on the map with their actual icon and logo, so that when people are traveling, you roll through the map and you can see, oh, there's an adaptive program here. At least you've got one resource that knows mountain biking trails, might be able to rent you equipment. And at the very least, you've got a community of people already built in, where if you're having an issue, their phone number's right there, their website's right there. You can navigate to their location through the app itself, and get a hold of them. And our whole sense is this is a giant community of people that has, let's face it, it's really difficult to get the information that you want for the amount of energy you're willing to expend for it. And our goal is not to have everything in one place and to be,
well, to shine the light on ourselves, right?
Yeah, the goal is not to shine a light on ourselves.
No, you're
Sorry,
good.
Rachel.
Just to highlight the work that other leaders in the disability community are already doing. And you had asked, Brendan, if we would want to let businesses know like what they could do to improve their score. And that's definitely on the horizon, but I think immediately would be to reward the businesses that are already a place that make our community feel welcomed. And we have a sticker system. If you get a green rating, or kind of a green, the questions are a weighted scale, right? And so there's like red being the lowest scores, yellow a medium, and then green, fully accessible. And for the green businesses, we're sending out "You Are Welcome Here" sticker with a Roll logo, kind of just to put on their business storefront. I think, when Roll becomes a household brand, there would be that public pressure of, ooh, we want that Roll stamp of improvement. And maybe their businesses are reaching out to us at that point to say, what can we do to improve this score? Or we're maybe at that point have the capacity to send them a friendly letter. But I think, if it's you and your community and it's a gym or a business that you want to frequent, that maybe the individual, and quite often like living a disabled life, so much of that advocacy falls onto you as the consumer, as the patron. But is notifying a business in your neighborhood what they can do to improve their own accessibility.
I like the sticker system because we talked about trying to do like AdaptX certified facilities, and they could have some sort of banner that says like it's an inclusive fitness center, and maybe your membership comes in and they don't have a disability, but you can almost guarantee that they have a relative or a friend, or they know someone with a disability that could benefit from that service. But unless it's visible to them, they don't know that you're making those efforts. And it's also like accessibility goes a little bit beyond the physical environment too. So like maybe my door has a handicap entrance, but my trainers have no interest in working with people with disabilities, or they have no knowledge on how to accommodate someone in a wheelchair, like to help them with their training experience. So it's like it's multidisciplinary, and that like it's not just a physical environment, but it's also how your wait staff communicates and talks to someone with a disability and their willingness to make the necessary accommodations.
Absolutely. And I think so much of that just comes from exposure, right? And just really in the last couple of years with social platforms have leaders in the disability community really had a place to have their voices amplified, or just visibility in general. And that is...
No, I think it's, you mentioned leaders in the disability space, and sometimes, because I can commiserate's not the word, but I can relate to the business owner that needs to run a profitable business and needs to cater to a dozen different things if they're a self-employed individual. And sometimes I see stuff on LinkedIn from like influential voices in the disability space, and they're like, if you don't do X, Y, Z, you don't care about people with disabilities. And it's like, sometimes that stuff becomes like overwhelming or almost intimidating, to the fact where I would wonder if sometimes a business owner doesn't even want to go down the quote unquote inclusion path because they're worried that they're going to be subject to criticism, or they're going to be subject to people not being able to access their facilities. And sometimes it's like, you have to incrementally get there. I don't know, like that's not to give them an out or give them an excuse for not being accessible, but like you have to also understand that there's a lot of things that go into running a service or running a business, that it can sometimes be a big undertaking.
Unfortunately, though, that's like the times we live in, right? Where like if you're online, you've got a business, you're subject to criticism. Now that the disability community has such like a louder voice and they're demanding more, that like we kind of talked on like the exposure, so exposure for businesses. But just yesterday, Joe and I saw this meme that was talking about, not a meme, but an infographic talking about this like circular pattern that says like a business isn't accessible, so then people with disabilities don't come. People with disabilities don't come, so they're not visible, so people don't know that the need exists, and then the cycle continues to perpetuate itself. And so trying to, that's one of the things in the app that we're trying to do, is not only like make that information more readily available on the front end, so that we're breaking down those barriers, getting people out and going. Maybe it's less intimidating for a person with a disability because they don't have to spend energy making that phone call to figure out, only to be disappointed. They've got the vetted information in front of them. But that then we want to be able to show on the business side, like, hey, there's an entire group here that's being left out, that you're not marketing to, that's an ever-growing population. Unfortunately, it's the only marginalized group that any person can become a part of. But with a a big aging population and the baby boomer population, we've got more and more people becoming disabled all day. And that's also a group that still has buying power, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we even see some unintended consequences of working with a lot of clients with disabilities here. Like the rest of our membership base feels like they're supporting a community and that's doing good. It's like you kind of build up that social capital that like when you're accessible, when you're inclusive, people want to support you. It's like businesses, I guess, like Patagonia or Bombas, where they donate X to these great causes, or people buy a pair of socks and they donate a pair of socks. It's like accessibility kind of has a compounding effect, I guess, in terms of when you help one person, it seems to impact a lot. So really interested, I guess, in terms of how you can demonstrate to businesses that accessibility is a profitable thing and it's like a good thing for your business. It's not just the right thing to do. And I'd be interested, Rachel, you're in the marketing, like how are you what's the marketing approach? Like, are you reaching out to people directly? Are you guys using social media ads or?
Yeah, right now it's a all approach, kind of like chaos theory, fail forward, try every venue. And it's certainly, it's a hard to market group too, for a reason. And we're still trying to crack that code right now. Yeah, we're taking social approach, a lot of like in-person community building. Fortunately for the disability population, like so much of the community building happens online because online becomes such an accessible platform. And we just still need to figure out how to, I don't know, go viral.
Are you, when you say hard to market population, are you referring to just individuals with disabilities, like, or are you marketing also to business owners and you're saying, hey, we'd love to get you listed on our platform? Like, do you reach out to the gyms directly or the restaurants directly?
Uh, in our community, it's been because the app is user driven right now. We're not like pulling data sets from Google. We're uploading all of our own reliable information. It's businesses that we're going to are just it's what's been rated, right? And so like in Denver proper, we're a Denver-based app, but it's a worldwide app. We've got partnerships in the community that we've been able to have these great conversations with. But cold calling businesses isn't something we've done yet.
It is. We did some outreach at the very beginning to places like Mobility Works that sells accessible vans nationwide, and it's a really funny experience cold calling these businesses where you say, who is the person that can tell me, every location that you have, and would you like to be included on this map feature? And we still haven't cracked that code. We thought a long time about there's the chicken and the egg problem of, do we spend a lot of time going after these businesses that, then does the app feel really commercial because you open it and all it is these nationwide chains? And we don't really want to become the place where you go to look for the Chili's that's around you. Instead, we'd love for the community to highlight, hey, there's a brewery on Broadway in Denver that is staffed by people with disabilities and mobility issues, that is run by a gal who is a former special educator, and their entire design is based around this community. It's called Brewability, and those are the we want to highlight the businesses that are doing this in an organic way, and have highlighted this community as something that they really care about. We want to be able to send more people their direction. And that comes from the community more than it comes from a lot of the corporate places that we can reach out to.
What is what's the biggest challenge outside of kind of what you already mentioned, but like the biggest challenges with scaling? So it's maybe like a hard market to market to, or it's a hard population to market to. But I guess if you look at like your next 12 months, what do you think would be most effective in helping you grow or scale?
I think for us, we've just got to get it in front of more eyes and in more hands. If you open the app right now in Des Moines, Iowa, there are 5 reviews and an adaptive program that are close to you. And so it's not something, it becomes a task, right? It becomes a task for you to do. But we've seen that there are people that are super, super engaged and want to share this information. One of our core tenets has been when you go to an accessible event, when you go to Crested Butte for adaptive mountain bike championships, you've got 50 or 60 people that have a huge amount of different nuance and different knowledge. And they go to all these places because there's not a lot of places in town. It's a small town. And so you basically canvas everything. You find out where the accessible hotels are. You find out where all these are. But if you go a week after that's over, you don't really have anybody to ask. That knowledge moves with that community. And unless you know somebody who was at the event that you can call and say, hey, where did you go that was accessible? Because I just don't have the energy today. We rode 20 miles. My chronic pain is flaring up, and I don't have the bandwidth to go to 4 restaurants and try to find a place where I actually fit in my chair and is welcoming. And so for us, it's getting it to those champions and doing a good job of making it easy enough to use so that it does have that component where you can say, oh, no, we were there last week. A bunch of people left reviews. Just scroll the map over to it and you can click through, and then you don't have to wonder whether or not it's accessible.
So getting yourself in front of large events that support a lot of people with disabilities, that just so they know that your app exists. And have you worked on partnering with any organizations? I think like what comes to mind is Team Hoyt, just because it's an organization that I run. So I run marathons pushing a wheelchair, and we have chapters kind of all around the country. So we have Team Hoyt Coeur d'Alene out in Idaho, and we have Team Hoyt Virginia Beach and San Diego. I wonder if getting it in front of people like that are already kind of championing inclusion, they're kind of trying to promote it through endurance sports. I wonder if people like that would be more receptive to participating.
We've had some soft wins. I know, like currently, Girls on the Run is working. Girls on the Run does a unique thing where all of their events are there's no para division. It's just all events are inclusive, and they're in progress of putting together an accessibility guide, and we're in cahoots with them to make sure that we get into that guide. But then some other organizations, even with personal connections, kind of like, well, there's a little bit of what can you do for us? What can we do for you? And there's a little bit of, we don't know that we really need you yet. Like we're not making a big enough noise. We don't have a big enough of a following just yet that maybe either we're not being taken, I don't know that we're not being taken seriously, but even within the community, we're hitting, stops. I think in part, so many of these adaptive programs are nonprofits and they're run with skeleton crews, right? So even just response time with emails gets lost, or the momentum, the excitement gets lost. Yeah, I'd love a quick problem solve there.
Yeah, are you familiar with the Kelly Brush Foundation? Have you heard
Yeah,
of that?
definitely.
Yeah, so they're working on the Active project, which sounds like it's something relatively similar in terms of mapping out accessible programs, adaptive programs. So from like your standpoint, from a business standpoint, like if our podcasts had thousands of listeners that were wheelchair users or individuals with disabilities, then it would make sense for you to try to market through our podcast. But like you said, you kind of have to demonstrate that there's value in sponsoring in events like the Crested Butte one, or sponsoring a podcast that reaches those users. It's tough to go from a lean business to nationwide or a scaled one. And I say that not really knowing because I've never scaled a business nationwide, but it is something that we're kind of working on through our curriculum, and we've had the opportunity to work with people all around the country. But I wonder if at like the university level, if they would be able to help you disseminate it, students on campus with disabilities, et cetera.
Yeah, that's definitely on our radar, including occupational and physical therapy graduate programs, and just tapping into any network that comes to mind.
It's one of those funny things because it's 1 in 11 people in the U.S. has a mobility issue, according to the census data that was 2 years ago, right? And so almost everybody knows somebody that would benefit from having really good information about places that are accessible, and hopefully that would lend itself towards businesses then understanding, oh, this is a population where if I do make my business accessible, then I'm welcoming this entire swath of people that can come to my business. We have talked to Kelly Brush, Matt Tilford. Shout out to him. He is taking on the Active project. He's a pretty incredible dude. So we're of the vein where a rising tide raises all ships. Our goal is not to our goal is to be the singular voice that it's easy to find. We want to be the web that you go to find these things. But our goal is not to be the end all be all. We know we're a small app. If we try to contain a huge amount of information, it's going to make things move a little bit slower. So our goal is same with the adaptive projects, not to be the end all be all where you can schedule things through the app and work through the app to get there, but to have it so you can find it very easily. You can access the information without having to search for it, without having to kind of go through everything. Same with gyms, I'd suppose, right? Where it'd be so nice if instead of calling 15 gyms and saying, hey, are you AdaptX certified? You can just go onto the map and say, oh, here's 2 gyms in my area that are AdaptX certified. Click on it, decide which one is closer and better for you or offers the hours that you like, and then you go there. And hopefully you take pictures and video and re-upload it to the app and share it with your friends and help that gym gain a bigger following. But
I pose this question as someone that does not know really anything about the topic as a whole outside of what I kind of consume through podcasts and Twitter and stuff. But are there AI tools with it becoming more prevalent? You see all these companies that are incorporating various AI plugins. Like, is that on your radar, or is it something that you think is going to contribute to your development? Have you guys kind of played around with any of those new pieces of software that have been kind of rolled out seemingly weekly in the last 5 or 6 months?
This is one of those areas where personally, like, Rachel is smarter at this than I am, but I really feel like it's so nuanced whether a place is accessible or not that I would worry that if we try to use an AI algorithm that you'd get a mishmash of all of the information, and then everywhere looks accessible or nowhere looks accessible for a whole region, right?
Yeah, it's like if you even plug a question into a chat GPT that's like, what organizations support people with disabilities in this area? It's like Special Olympics pops up. It's like, okay, that doesn't really tell me much outside of that there's a Special Olympics that does stuff for people with disabilities. Doesn't really tell me anything. So I'm sure as they become more refined, but I don't even know the magnitude of the software problem that some of those things are trying to model. Seems incomprehensible to me, but I wasn't sure if it was going to play a role, I guess, in how you grow and kind of how you answer questions.
I mean, it's certainly like the answer is always like maybe, right? Maybe, like technology changes so fast. Like how we will use tools in the future is yet to be determined. But I think that reliability is the biggest piece that keeps us from trying to pull that data. It would be great. It would be great if we could reliably pull data, and then we would have, locations nationwide rather than relying on the user input. But it just comes down to the information that this community wants is so nuanced that it really has to be like, we have to control, the disability community has to control that narrative of what defines accessibility.
Have you dealt with like inaccurate reviews, like or like inaccurate information that's been entered into the app?
Well, that's a great question because it could be inaccurate, right? But since we're guiding the questions, since we've determined that rating scale and it's not a subjective like 0 to 5 stars, we hope that our information is just more objective because you're following our prompted questions. But with the amount of users we have on the app right now, maybe like one location only has one review instead of like multiple reviews waiting that. So I think the more users we get on the app, the more reviews there are per location, that weighted system becomes really accurate. Yeah.
So what can we do to help role mobility become a household name or commonplace? Not that I have some audience that would accelerate you to a nationwide presence, but what can like my organization that's tackling a similar problem of like how to create more accessible places, specifically in the fitness space, like what can we do for role mobility for you?
I think first and foremost, the idea of having an accurate and having a way to find a gym that's close to you that is accessible and does want people with accessibilities in their gym, that would be awesome. And then I think, for us, it's that grassroots organization of each of those gyms telling 5 people that they know that come and have a real buy-in to this space, and encouraging them to download and use the app. And then I think one of the things that we have seen is just the longer we're around, the more people are willing to give us a shot, because community has been burned so many times with so many, hey, this new thing is coming out, it'll be so great for you. And then 2 years later, nobody's supporting it. And I think we are very committed towards, if something is wrong, we want to fix it, and continuing to have new features and have new things so that this really turns into whatever the community wants it to be instead of what we thought it might be 2 years ago. That's our commitment. Is I'm not here to tell anybody what they need. I'm here to listen and let them define the progress and define where this goes next.
That's been a tough question to answer for me too, as we like try to put together a curriculum that teaches fitness professionals how to work with different disabilities. Like, I don't have all the answers, and the literature certainly doesn't have all the answers. Like, if we go to like the medical research, it's scarce when it comes to disabilities. The feasibility of doing large scale longitudinal studies for wheelchair users, people with CP, people with Down syndrome is pretty difficult. So it's like you can try to be evidence-based, and but it's hard to kind of come up with one answer to fit a problem that has that's pretty diverse. So it's like you said, I'm not teaching you how to train all people with disabilities. I'm hopefully just giving you like perspective as to kind of how you can approach the problem and how you can communicate more effectively and kind of create better environments. Rachel, what do you, kind of maybe as a question that we could wrap up, but like, what do you think has to be done to make businesses more inclusive and accessible?
Well, that's a big question.
That's a loaded question. Yeah, it's a loaded question that definitely doesn't have one direct answer. But from your perspective, I guess, like, what's a first step that a business can take to start moving in the right direction?
I think it's more of like a societal question. I recently just spent a month in Greece, and one of the biggest differences I noticed from the States to the European market is, in America, we have a bit of better infrastructure thanks to the ADA, even, and it's like not even fully enforced status. But the cultural awareness around people with disabilities just in your day-to-day passing is incredibly limited. But when I was in Europe, although the infrastructure is not there, the social awareness is. So before I could even approach a business, and they've done their best to retrofit, and maybe it's a ramp that's at a 45-degree angle that's not entirely usable, but you appreciate that, like, hey, they tried to make this 1,000-year-old building welcoming to me. But as you approach a business, somebody is there before you can think for yourself, maybe even a little too aggressively helping you. So, or even strangers on the street, a lot of jumping in a way that people just don't interact with me in a chair that way here in the States. So I think it's a societal shift that then hopefully puts that pressure onto businesses.
Yeah, and like you said, kind of when you referred to that graphic a while back, like if a business is determined or if a business is inaccessible, they don't have wheelchair users in it, all the other able-bodied or however you want to define them individuals don't see it as a problem, and they just kind of perpetuate that narrative. It's like starting to open people's eyes, I guess, as to how inaccessible so many things are. But unless businesses, I guess, make the effort to address accessibility, then a lot of people just assume, I guess, that it's not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a really interesting conversation with a gentleman who works for the city and goes out to places, and he was working for, I forget what the business was, but he went to them and said, hey, you're completely redesigning this entire thing. You need to replace at least one set of these stairs with a ramp. You need to have an accessible entrance. And the guy said, but we don't have people with disabilities. And he just said, yeah, of course you don't. You have
Obviously
12 steps to get to your front
door
right now.
They will come.
You will never see these people because right now you can't see these people. But that's the kind of the, yeah.
It's an educational thing. It's a societal reform, like entire reform issue. So, but Joe, Rachel, thanks for taking the time to talk. We'll look forward to sharing more about Roll Mobility. We'll toss a download link to the app in the show notes, and we'll share it across the different platforms in the coming weeks when we start to post the podcast episodes. But really appreciate your time and the work that you guys are doing. And I'll look forward to, I think there's definitely some ways that AdaptX can leverage what you guys are doing, and hopefully we can support what you're doing in turn. So thanks again for joining me today.
Likewise.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brendan.